Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you are new. Thank you for taking time out of your day to check the video out. We have more PlayStation news, rumors, and leaks to go over and cover here today. So do me a favor before we dive into these topics. If you end up enjoying the video or finding it informative, be sure to leave it a like. It helps the videos out more than you know. And if you are new here to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well. We're starting here with the release date for an upcoming PlayStation 5 console exclusive. It's called Fort Solis. It's an upcoming sci-fi thriller from Fallen Leaf and Black Drakkar Games with some big talent behind it. One of its stars, Troy Baker, starred in a trailer that announced the Fort Solis release date, and it's coming out on August 22nd for PS5 and PC. No price point has been revealed yet. Troy Baker, who plays Wyatt Taylor, introduced the trailer on IGN and walked through some of the game's features. He explained that he knew pretty quickly that he wanted to star in Fort Solis because he'd been working with Roger Clark, who is most famous for playing Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2. Baker went on about how great the story was, how it spoke to him, and was the kind of game that he would like to play. He even said it was replayable enough to go through over and over, and praised its visuals, which are powered by Unreal Engine 5. Fort Solis is also getting a physical release on PlayStation 5, as Merge Games announced earlier in June. It comes with a downloadable art book and a soundtrack. So there you go. I don't know how many of you guys were aware of this, but this is a PlayStation 5 console exclusive. And, you know, it's interesting to see Roger Clark starring in this game. I feel like I haven't really seen him in much else since Red Dead Redemption 2. So yeah, let me know if it's a game that you're interested in. Moving on from that, we just have a small but potentially interesting update from Hideo Kojima over on Twitter. He put out a tweet saying with Jim Ryan, and there are a couple of photos of him standing there with Jim Ryan, and they're both wearing matching zip-up hoodies with the PlayStation logo on it, as well as the Kojima Productions logo on it. Now, I don't necessarily think this is anything too significant, but it does seem to let us know that Sony recently paid a visit to Kojima Productions, and I have no doubt that this has to do with Death Stranding 2. I don't necessarily know that this means we're going to get like a new trailer on it anytime soon, but, you know, it's always interesting to see things like this. So there you go, Jim Ryan and Hideo Kojima kind of hanging out together a little bit. But moving on from that, we have some very interesting topics to go over regarding Microsoft and Sony, starting here with how Microsoft apparently considered buying Bungie and housemarque before Sony ended up grabbing them. Documents unsealed during the ongoing Microsoft Activision versus FTC court proceedings reveal that the Xbox maker considered reacquiring Bungie and purchasing Finnish studio housemarque as recently as 2021. While housemarque was in Microsoft's consideration set, Bungie made it to the company's final watch list. An internal Microsoft presentation now made public shows that Xbox had a shopping list of 100 plus companies it could potentially acquire, with both Bungie and housemarque making it to the top 17 candidates for consideration on console and PC. The final watch list included Bungie, Hitman maker IO Interactive, Supergiant Games, and Zynga, now owned by Take-Two, among others. So not only is it very interesting to find this information out, to know that Microsoft had 100 plus studios and developers that they were considering trying to acquire. I know that From Software was on that list. I know that CD Projekt Red was on that list. I mean, pretty much, you know, a lot of these big names that you see in the industry, they were on this list. But it is kind of fascinating to think that housemarque could have been acquired by Microsoft. And this is where you can kind of tell that Sony was very aware that Microsoft is getting ready to go on a spending spree, and that's why they immediately acquired housemarque, especially after a game like Returnal, because if they didn't, it seems like Microsoft absolutely would have gotten them. And the same with Bungie. I find it really funny that Microsoft was considering reacquiring Bungie, but Sony ended up getting Bungie before Microsoft could get them back. So definitely some interesting information. But it gets even more interesting. It seems that Bethesda's boss was unhappy with Xbox exclusivity. This is what a newly revealed email is letting us know. Bethesda boss Pete Hines isn't happy that Microsoft is forcing the studio's games to skip the PS5, according to internal emails unsealed during the ongoing Microsoft Activision versus FTC court proceedings. Hines quizzed Xbox boss Phil Spencer about the announcement of Call of Duty remaining multi-platform following Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard and wanted to know why Bethesda games were treated differently. Hines first emailed ZeniMax and Bethesda leadership, including Todd Howard, a snippet of Microsoft's announcement regarding the Activision Blizzard merger and Call of Duty's multi-platform status. Hines seemed annoyed and wanted to know why Bethesda wasn't given a heads up about the deal and why Activision's handling is the quote opposite end quote of how Bethesda is being handled. Hines then reached out to Spencer via an email that was milder in tone than the one above, expressing his surprise at the announcement while reiterating that Bethesda was told to do the opposite of what Microsoft wants Activision Blizzard to do, especially with Call of Duty. The email is particularly interesting in light of Hines' deposition, during which he claimed that keeping Starfield exclusive to Xbox consoles was the right thing to do from a development standpoint. And so, yes, we see further hypocrisy being revealed here, unsurprisingly, when it comes to both Microsoft as well as Bethesda in this case. And I think that this just paints a pretty clear picture that things are not, or at least at first, things were not going as smoothly between Microsoft and Bethesda as we were led to believe. Now, obviously, neither Microsoft nor Bethesda are going to come out and publicly talk about this, but you can clearly see how at least Pete Hines was bothered by the fact that Microsoft and Phil Spencer were coming out constantly talking about how these titles from Activision Blizzard, specifically Call of Duty, are going to remain multi-platform. But when it comes to Bethesda's titles and, their bigger title like Starfield, it's just been made clear that this is not going to be multi-platform. Even if that's what you guys were hoping for, even if that's what you wanted, we are going to treat Bethesda and Bethesda games differently. And clearly that is just not something that at least Pete Hines of Bethesda was expecting or very happy with. But as we, read at the bottom of this article here, turns out that I guess he just is perfectly okay with it now, because he claims that apparently it, not only is it okay, it was the right thing to do. So yeah, some very interesting stuff we're learning through these emails, but this is where things really take a turn, and you are going to see people downplay this. You are going to see people treating this like it's not a big deal, but believe me when I tell you, this will tell you everything you need to know about Microsoft's intent and their plans when it comes to acquiring publishers such as Bethesda as well as Activision Blizzard. I have an article here from WCCF Tech, and it says, as part of their efforts to get their proposed $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard approved by regulators, Microsoft has been facing off with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission in court for the past couple of days. The FTC wants to impose an injunction that would prevent Microsoft and Activision from closing the deal before a more crucial trial in August that would determine if the FTC has an antitrust case. Court documents and testimonies have already revealed some juicy tidbits, including that future Bethesda games may come to PlayStation, Microsoft's admission that Xbox has lost the console wars, and the uncertain status of The Elder Scrolls 6, and Phil Spencer vowing under oath that Call of Duty is staying multi-platform. The latest bombshells largely have to do with Team Xbox's strategy heading into this current generation of gaming. While Xbox executives have tried to put a happy face on their moves, saying they simply want to bring more games to as many people as possible, perhaps unsurprisingly, it seems they were much more aggressive behind the scenes. In a recently uncovered 2019 email between Xbox Game Studios boss Matt Booty and Xbox CFO Tim Stewart, the former said that they were in a unique position to, quote, go spend Sony out of business, end quote. So this is the email in its entirety. We, Microsoft, are in a very unique position to be able to go spend Sony out of business. If we think that video game content matters in 10 years, we might look back and say totally would have been worth it to lose $2 billion or $3 billion in 2020 to avoid a situation where Tencent, Google, Amazon, and even Sony have become the Disney of games and own most of the valuable content. Google is 3 to 4 years away from being able to have a studio up and running. Amazon has shown no ability to execute on game content. Content is the one moat that we have in terms of a catalog that runs on current devices and capability to create new. Sony is really the only player who could compete with Game Pass, and we have a 2-year and 10 million sub lead. So yeah, we can officially disregard Microsoft's lines that buying up endless studios was just about increasing access to games or any other high-minded goal. That said, a lot has changed in the past 3 or 4 years. Google and Amazon are no longer in the running at all. Opposition to the Activision Blizzard purchase has put a kink in Microsoft's acquisition plans, and Game Pass has not been the success the company had hoped for. Speaking of Game Pass, a newly revealed email between Phil Spencer and Tim Stewart reveals something else many suspected, that Microsoft de-emphasized the Xbox Series X and S production in favor of a focus on Game Pass/cloud and acquisitions. And so, yeah, as you can see, we are beginning to see Microsoft's true intentions slowly being unraveled. To me, it was always obvious. I know that to many of you, it was always obvious, but we continue to see a certain group of individuals on the internet try to run with a specific narrative and just completely falling for, you know, this kind of act, the charade that Microsoft continues to put forth for the sake of optics. And I get it. I'm not saying Microsoft should just come out and say what their intentions are, but I just find it comical that anybody would actually fall for it, let alone turn around and, you know, point the finger at a company like Sony while simultaneously propping up a company like Microsoft. It truly is laughable. But at the end of the day, this confirms what we all suspected, that Microsoft's plan is to essentially, you know, spend Sony out of business. That's exactly what they said themselves. I mean, they are pointing out the obvious here. There's no doubt about that. I'm not saying that Microsoft is completely wrong for saying, hey, we have way more money than our competition, so maybe we should go spend that to, you know, get our competition out of the picture. I understand why they would want to do that. But for anybody out here defending Microsoft, trying to make it seem like their end goal is to not just completely eradicate Sony and buy everything up and essentially create a monopoly, that is exactly what their intention is. And anybody who doesn't clearly see that is just putting the blinders on at this point. So, you know, to me, this is some pretty compelling evidence here, and I don't know if it's necessarily going to mean anything when this is all said and done. But I also do want to acknowledge here that one of the arguments Microsoft continues to make is that they lost the console war. You know, you look at how poorly the Xbox Series X and S is selling compared to the PS5, and yet we have another email here that straight up confirms this was an intentional decision on Microsoft's part. They wanted to prioritize things like Game Pass, acquisitions, and even cloud. You know, the very thing that the CMA is blocking this merger over. The cloud. They see what Microsoft's long-term plans are with the cloud, and they're saying, no, Activision Blizzard, it's just too much. We see what you guys are trying to do. We see right through, you know, the charade you guys are trying to put on. So, yeah, that argument that Microsoft's using, oh, we lost the console war, it's because they intentionally decided to deprioritize the console and pretty much not produce enough. So, yeah, at this point, you know, there's nothing left to say. I want to leave it to you guys. Let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. I'll be interested to see what you have to say. Again, leave the video a like if you enjoyed it or found it informative. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.